Hello, here we are to discuss The Adoptee's Journey from Loss and Trauma to Healing and Empowerment by Cameron Lee Small. We are on chapter one, Missing Family.
Yeah. One thing, you and I talked about this off camera. Excellent writing. This
Ooh,
is
good writer, compelling and
compelling. And you know what I like really? I was reading this last night and I went and found my husband in the kitchen and I read him some of it. I was like, you need to hear this because I think because he is in the church community and stuff, it's almost more powerful because he's so direct about it. Like,
mm-hmm.
this is what adoptees feel. And Cam, I'm giving you a shout out for that. It's neat.
I like this right on the first page. Advocacy is rarely a story about people who have something to lose. It's usually about those who've already suffered the unthinkable but would rather die than let it consume the others.
Yep. It's
Very
great.
powerful.
Yeah, because he's doing advocacy work in a very uncomfortable place
Mm-hmm.
where people are very pro adoption. And
Right.
part of the reason we have adoption is because of the church. So, I mean,
Exactly.
he's doing hard work and the way he does it is, it's neat. And I like this part. He said something about in the beginning with families, it's like a death. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
many of families were dead to begin with, at least socially. This part I like. The social death is surgical. Your birth certificate may include your adoptive name with no mention of the one given to you at birth, or one assigned to you at birth may have been penciled by a social worker, then reconfigured into the words adopted parents assign. Typography happens to honor and bury us, our first and last names, maybe even brand new sets of clothes and fresh linens. Not all biography can hide, though. I mean, it goes on, but just it's surgical. It's surgically done.
Right.
It's good. It's
And
good
I like how
writing.
he says, adoptions and funerals are alike in that they both
Mm.
turn natural facts into a social event. Their difference lies in how much we wonder if one could be avoided more than the other,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. A lot of ahas in this. I was
Um,
really
I
happy to
know.
dig into this book.
And I liked it's he says, as if who we are is too alive to stay put in new soil. For a child and even for some adults, that's not always perceived as a strength, so we might develop our own creative ways to hide our face and deny our history. The amount of cognitive and emotional bandwidth it all takes from us is extraordinary. So true.
Yeah. That's like what I
Thinking
was like
about
following. Ah,
all the people we've talked to, and all the song and dance that we've had to do
yes.
to adapt, assimilate,
Yeah.
survive, you know?
All of it. This is I'm following Bill around the kitchen, reading in this. Listen to this. Listen to so I'm
Because
like,
it
this
is,
is
when you think about the
yeah.
statistics of suicide and suicidal ideation, we are
Yeah.
so high up there. And this kind of says exactly why that is.
Yeah. It's true.
Um,
Well, he says, okay, and then it kind of goes on. It talks about his story, but first he says, thinking about adoption, right? We humans seem to be born wired for an assurance of things unseen. For example, object permanence is a developmental capacity that guides our actions in reference both to here and now and there and then. Like, we always say this, but you have to kind of know who you are to go forward.
mhm.
No matter how, if it's ugly, it's ugly, but you have to know who you are. Like, you're floating. It's like this floating thing. And he says, these are things adoptees think. I think about my birth parents. I wonder about whether my parents ever think about me. I think about whether I am similar to my parents. I wondered about my brothers and sisters in Korea for himself. I'm curious about my Korean name. I imagine what it would have been like to grow up in Korea. He's not, just because he came over doesn't mean you're ignore like all of a
It isn't
sudden.
automatically, of course, again, no blank slates.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole history and, especially for transracial and
Uh,
transnational adoptions who are in white families, it's a very different
yeah.
experience, so many more layers. And in fact, they said he had a Dr. Adam Kim and his colleagues introduced a psychological measurement called the Birth Family Thoughts Scale. And it was
Yeah.
created to help researchers and practitioners understand more about the lived experience of transracial and international adoptees, which was
Yeah.
so interesting. That's what you're talking about. He was wondering, I
Yes.
imagine, what it
Yeah.
would have been like to grow up in Korea. And then he goes
Yeah.
into, I guess,
he was there for, he was really part of, he was older,
Mm-hmm.
and
3.
he knew his family, and his was caused because of death, I think, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but he remember, like, he has that culture,
Tangible, tangible
memories.
memories and experiences, and how painful.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, painful to actually have had that little family unit and then lose it, and then
Yeah. I was thinking that. Can you imagine? Because you must be such a fish out of water coming
yeah,
to the States and you're like, whoa, what's happened? I mean,
I
yeah.
was a kind of confused, which I will ask him because there's one part that says it's a dream, but then he
Yeah.
got a letter. So were these
I feel like because he's young, it was like he remembers, but maybe not correctly or
right?
something. I want to ask him too. I was a little bit confused by that too.
Yeah.
And
Um, and then he's got a letter, which was just so
uh,
heartbreaking. It
yeah.
was at the funeral, and he never, it says you never saw the box get lowered into the ground, but you could feel it. Dada, where are you? Where are you? Which ended the
Uh,
chapter.
yeah. But I can feel so much loneliness from him in his writing.
I
It's
know.
insane. Like, I
And
mean,
he's got his own child, right?
yeah,
Who he's very close to. Like it's just a whole different. This is
yeah.
how we talk about adoptees and parenting, and
Oh, I have to say, in fact, it's funny you brought that up because this morning I opened up, just Instagram, and he has something called Therapy Redeemed. That's how you find him. Okay. He had a cute little thing of his son performing in the show, and he's like zooming in, his son's waving and waving, and I almost burst into tears because I just read this.
oh,
And it was so like he's so excited, right? It makes me cry. But yeah, it's really that exactly. And like he has his own kids, so he has this perspective of like, whoa, what was happened to me now?
mm-hmm. I know. Well, that is kind of for
Mm-hmm.
many people, that's the gateway, right? You have your
Yeah.
child and think, how did how did somebody give me away? How did that happen? Before you even
Yeah.
know your origin story, like how? Once you
Yeah.
experience that, I mean,
Yeah.
for some of us, other people, I have a friend who was adopted and she has not remotely started to look at stuff, and I can just see
Same.
her. I see her going through all this stuff, and I'm like, if you would like listen to the podcast,
I know.
please listen to it. But I see her own she was so disconnected from her first child that, I mean, completely shoved him away
Yeah,
and couldn't. So everybody has a different response, right? So,
they do. Yeah, some cling too tight and some push away. I mean,
hmm,
but it
yeah,
affects us. It affects our children. It
it
affects
does.
us.
It's generational trauma.
Yeah.
It is. Well, next week we will go to chapter 2, Facing Our History. I'm really loving this book so far.
Me too. It's beautifully written.
And so
Yeah.
I know Louise mentioned in today's episode piece, but this is our live podcast that we filmed in Atascadero. So
Yeah.
very it's great. You'll get to hear claps for
You'll get to hear
us.
claps, and I think you really need to go to YouTube to watch
Yes.
because
YouTube will have a lot more on it. We're going to dump the
yeah,
whole
everything
so
on it.
right, listeners, go to YouTube to our YouTube to see this because you'll see the whole thing. For the audio, we're taking some of it out
Yeah.
to make it fit, but YouTube
And
will
get
have everything. So
and everyone will love Chris like we do.
yes,
Oh,
he's a great guest.
it's a great
So
cast.
all
All
right,
right.
well, we'll see you in a minute for Chris.
See you in a minute.